The film begins with a flashback to Ignatius Parish, where he is lying beneath a tree in the woods with his girlfriend Mirren, and they exchange a heartfelt promise to always love each other, and this scene sets the tone for the rest of the movie. And we fast forward to the present, where Iggy wakes up on the ground holding a vodka bottle, and he stumbles through the living room and plays a record as he imagines Mirren dancing for him. And outside his window, he sees a news van and numerous raging protesters telling Iggy to go to hell. Apparently his girlfriend Mirren was raped and murdered, and Iggy is the prime suspect, and everyone in town believes he did it. And he's devastated by the loss of his girlfriend and the accusations against him. And Iggy decides to call his friend and his lawyer Lee, and he asks him for help. And then he goes to his parents' house to hide from the press. And Iggy's father, Derek, wants to hire the best attorneys in Seattle, but each of them wants Iggy to plead guilty, while Lee is the only one who believes Iggy is innocent. And later, Lee informs Iggy that any evidence discovered on Mirren's remains was actually destroyed in the forensics lab, leaving Iggy with nothing to prove his innocence. And feeling pretty devastated, Iggy goes to a bar, but the bartender tells him to go out because he's making other people uncomfortable. But his old friend Glenna steps up for Iggy and she pours him a drink. And later that night, Mirren's father Dale and the townspeople hold a memorial service for Mirren, and they hold it around this tree where her body was found. And her father weeps over his daughter, and he accuses Iggy of murdering her, who else can he blame? Yeah. Whenever it's one person that died, everybody blames the husband or the boyfriend. Yeah, it's a casual thing. Especially if there is no evidence. And back to the movie, Iggy was watching this memorial service from a treehouse where he and Mirren used to go to frequently. And after everyone leaves, Iggy consumes a large amount of alcohol, and he destroys the statue of Mary and he urinates all over Mirren's memorial. And Glenna catches him doing this and she tells him to calm down, and Iggy loses his faith in God and he blames him for not helping Mirren when she needed him. And then he wakes up the following morning in the same bed as Glenna, with whom he partied with last night. I guess you guys understand what I'm saying. But they were doing it last night, yeah. And in the morning, he also notices that he began to grow horns from his forehead, and they hurt when he touches them. And he can literally see them growing with his own eyes. And he asks Glenna if she sees the horns too, and she does. But her only response is to laugh. And Glenna starts acting really strange, and she devours a box of donuts, and she confesses her desire to gain weight while telling Iggy that she's worthless and that nobody finds her attractive unless they're intoxicated just like he was last night. And Iggy believes he's cursed now somehow, and he leaves Glenna with the donuts and he goes to a doctor's office to have his horns removed, or to basically get dehorned. Is that a thing? Dehorned? I hope it is. Anyways, in the waiting room, a little girl is screaming while her mother sits and does nothing. And the mother vents to Iggy and she tells him that she wants to kick her daughter's ass and divorce her husband and do it with her black golf instructor. And Iggy's a little creeped out by this, and it's here that he starts to discover that he has some kind of power over people. And everyone there begins to behave really bizarrely, just like Glenna. They start saying and doing things that normal people would never do or say. And inside the doctor's room, the doctor gets in and he sees his horns, and he chooses not to deal with them, and he instead tells Iggy that he wants to do it with his daughter's friend. And then he also offers Iggy to snort some Oxycontin with him. And Iggy simply instructs him to just cut off the horns, and he puts him under anesthesia and he loses consciousness. And he starts dreaming of his childhood to where he met Mirren at a church. And a young Iggy and his friend play with cherry bombs, and they threw cherry bombs and talked about Mirren. And Iggy had a crush on her back then, and Glenna, who was also there, was kind of feeling sad because she had feelings for Iggy. And Iggy then takes this dare to win a cherry bomb, and he nearly drowns, but Lee saves him. And later, he trades the cherry bomb with Lee for fixing Mirren's broken necklace, but Lee loses 2 fingers when the cherry bomb goes off accidentally. And Iggy then returns it to Mirren and begins hanging out with her, and then Iggy admits to Mirren that Lee was the one that repaired the necklace and not him. And he blames himself for what happened, and Mirren assures him that she left the necklace there for Iggy to find, and that's when they share their first kiss. And when Iggy wakes up from his anesthesia, he finds the saw in his horn, and he sees the doctor just doing it right in front of him with the nurse. And Iggy then just goes to the mirror and he sees his horn horns, and they're actually much larger now, because these things are like growing overnight. They're like really fast growers. And then Iggy thinks about his situation and he goes to a priest. And the priest tells him that he's actually cursed because he turned away from God. And the priest also rudely suggests that he can get a rope and just hang himself, or he can do it for him. And then when he goes to see Lee, he finds out that Lee is the only one who's unaware of his horns. And Iggy is led to believe that the horns are actually kind of useless on good people. What the horns basically do is they make people reveal their deepest, darkest secrets. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And when Iggy pays a visit to his parents, the power of the horns cause his mother to confess that she doesn't really want him as her son, and she would also have been happier if he wasn't her son. And his father tells him that he's worthless without Mirren, and that a friend of his assisted him in burning down the forensics laboratory where the DNA test results were being done, because his father thought that his son, Iggy, actually did do the murder. And this was pretty difficult to hear, so Iggy just goes to a bar to drink it off. And he gets harassed by a swarm of reporters looking for a juicy scoop from him, and Iggy challenges them to a fight. He tells them to fight it off, and whoever wins basically gets an interview with him. And after he told them that, he just walks into a bar. And inside the bar, the bartender threatens to beat Iggy, and Iggy tells him that he doesn't really want to do that, and then the bartender confesses that he wants to burn down his bar for the insurance money. And Iggy then gets up and he demands information from anyone in the bar who may have knowledge of Mirren's murder. And several people reveal their darkest sinful secrets as the bartender burns down the building and Iggy walks past the journalists who are still fighting. And Iggy also learns from one of the confessions that the new witness for the case is from the diner where Mirren broke up with him the night before she died. And yes, she broke up with him the night before she died. Pretty weird, right? We'll unpack all of that later. And Iggy then gets inside his car to grab a smoke, and he's presented with another flashback. And Iggy was telling Lee and Terry that he would be popping the question to Mirren that evening at the diner, and Terry is his brother. And he asks Lee and Terry to join them for the celebration. And later, Iggy meets Mirren at the diner, and Mirren looks pretty sad, and she informs Iggy that she's moving to LA, and he thinks it's a good opportunity for a new beginning. But to determine if he truly wants to spend the rest of his life with her, Mirren advises that they should break up and start dating other people. But Iggy believes she's seeing someone else already, cause that makes no sense, right? Like, let's just break up to see if we really love each other. That's pretty insane. And as she prepares to leave, Iggy stands up and confronts her, and he's pretty pissed, and the manager asks him to leave. And Iggy then walks out without a struggle as Terry was coming inside for the celebration that he thought was happening, but apparently was actually the worst thing that could potentially happen. Yeah. And then we see Iggy going back to the diner to confront Veronica, the waitress who's been giving the police fabricated information about him on the night Mirren was killed. And Iggy locates the waitress, and he discovers that she's been fabricating a bunch of stories just to be famous. Yeah. And according to what Veronica told the cops, Iggy dragged Mirren into his car, he drove her into the woods, killed her before he, did her, and that's what she told the cops. Yeah. And after confronting Veronica, Iggy visits this jazz venue where Terry and his band were performing. And Glenna approaches him and confesses that she's always loved him, which he already knew. And after the show, Terry and Iggy meet outside, and he admits to having been with Mirren after Iggy had left the diner. And when Iggy touches Terry, he discovers what transpired that evening. Apparently, he can also see the past and events through other people's souls. He basically has devil powers at this point, okay? And when he sees his vision of Terry doing stuff in the past, Terry apparently drove Mirren away from the diner, and Mirren got out of the car, and on her way to her house, she ran into the woods in the rain. And Terry passed out in his vehicle, and the following morning, he woke up with a bloody rock in his hand, and he ran inside the woods only to discover Mirren's body. And he threw the rock into the lake after wrapping it in his shirt, and then after that, he just ran away. And when Iggy sees this, he gets really pissed and he assaults Terry until he's arrested by Eric, a police officer who was also his friend in the past. And Iggy gets released from jail the next morning, thanks to Lee's assistance, and the following day, Iggy finds Lee in the city and he's wearing Mirren's necklace. And when he asks him how he got it, he initially denies that she's the one that gave it to him, but then he admits that she was the one that gave it to him. And then Iggy breaks down crying because he believes Mirren was leaving him for Lee. And he also discovers that Lee couldn't see his horns, not because Lee's a good person or whatever, but because he was wearing the necklace, and the necklace was actually a crucifix. And crucifixes are holy, and Iggy is cursed and has devil powers. And you know, the crucifix is the opposite of his devil powers, and that's why it doesn't basically work on Lee. And when Iggy visits Dale, Mirren's mother, at his house to try to find out if Mirren was seeing anybody, or she'd mentioned leaving him to her father, Dale points a shotgun at him and he tells him to leave his property. Iggy then goes down an alley to remove his horns forcibly, and he realizes that snakes are actually following him. And wherever he goes, there are like a swarm of snakes. They don't actually harm him, they just slither onto him and he doesn't seem to mind? Yeah. And Iggy then finds Eric and his companion in their car, and he threatens to arrest him. But they went on to confess their sexual orientation and their love for one another. They then proceed to make out and do it inside the car. Good for them. And Iggy then uses the snakes to take vengeance against Veronica. And the snakes enter her vehicle and they bite her all over her face. And Terry is also tortured by the memories of Mirren's death after Iggy forces him to OD on drugs. And Iggy then meets up with Lee and he removes the cross necklace from him, and Lee can finally see Iggy's horns. And by the power of the horns, Lee admits that he actually killed Mirren. And Iggy chokes Lee when he finds that out, and in a flashback, you know how I told you he actually sees the past when he touches people? Yeah, and in that flashback, it's revealed that Lee was deeply envious of Iggy throughout their early years, and he'd fallen in love with Mirren as well. And Lee followed Mirren into the woods, believing she left Iggy to be with him, but Mirren tells him that she loves Iggy more than anything in the world, and when he heard that, in a jealous fit of rage, Lee raped her, and then he killed her by cracking her head open with a rock. And then he placed it on Terry, and he took her necklace, and he fled. And Iggy then demands Lee to turn himself in, but Lee grabs a chain and repeatedly whips Iggy in the back, and then he shoves him into the car, and he douses it in kerosene, and then he lights him on fire. And it doesn't end there, he actually crashes it into a lake. And later, Lee tells the cops that Iggy actually confessed to killing Mirren before he self-deleted. Unfortunately, by the power of the horns, Iggy is alive again, and he comes out of the lake disfigured and burnt. And he goes to Mirren's father's Dale's house, and he actually tells him that he's not the one that killed her, and he tells him everything, and Dale believes him. And Dale now realizes that Iggy is not the murderer, and he hands over the key to Mirren's lockbox to Iggy. And Iggy also puts on Mirren's necklace, and when he puts it on, his body's restored, and his horns also vanish. And he discovers a note from Mirren inside the box, explaining that she knew he was going to propose, but she was apparently dying from cancer, and she didn't want him to suffer, and that's why she pushed him away. And Iggy pays Terry a visit in the hospital where he was recovering from ODing, and Iggy apologizes for his actions, and he informs Terry that Lee is the true murderer, and that he's gonna find him. And then Iggy goes to Lee's house, and he confronts him about the other night, but Lee doesn't seem to remember, cause he's pretending that he doesn't remember. And Iggy then takes him to the area of the forest where Mirren was killed, and Eric and Terry show up and they place Lee under arrest, and Lee grabs the shotgun out of Eric's hand and he shoots Terry in the leg and he injures him. And Iggy tries to take the gun from Lee, only to cause Lee to blast off Eric's head. And Iggy then rips off the necklace and he starts to sprout wings and he turns into this demonic creature with even bigger horns. And Lee tries to wound Iggy by shooting at him, but Iggy bleeds lava and snakes surround Lee, wrapping themselves around him, and Iggy telepathically forces the snakes down Lee's throat, gagging him to death. And now, finally, Iggy has finally avenged his girlfriend's death. He then falls down and his body just hardens and he turns to ash. And the film then concludes with the scene of Iggy and Mirren beneath the tree, implying that they finally reunited in the afterlife. But you would think that after somebody grew horns and had devil powers and literally turned into a demonic creature, that they'd actually go to hell, but apparently not. It's a pretty cool ending. I really like happy endings. I really hope you guys enjoyed that recap. I hope you guys leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you guys on my next recap. I love you all very much. Bye.